I never imagined that the most painful words of my life would come from the mouth of the boy I gave birth to. I carried him in my womb for 9 months, stayed awake night after night while he cried with fever, gave up careers, relationships, dreams I had before I even knew I would be a mother. And there he was, Nathan, looking into my eyes with a coldness I had never seen on that face, saying, "Mom, you weren't invited to the party. We only called people who matter." He said it and turned his back, and I stood frozen in the hallway of my own home, holding a box with the birthday cake I had made myself for the grandson I barely knew yet, feeling the ground disappear beneath my feet. But what happened the next day changed everything. Not just for me, for all of them. My name is Dorothy. I am 63 years old, and for 40 of them, I was the woman who made everything work in silence. I raised Nathan practically alone after his father, Richard, decided that family life was a burden he wasn't willing to carry. Richard left when Nathan was 4 years old, leaving behind a bank account with $400 and a note written on the back of a napkin saying he needed to find himself. I needed to find myself too. I found myself in the grocery store line with $3 in my wallet, counting coins to buy milk. I found myself working 2 jobs simultaneously for years, sleeping 4 hours a night, dreaming of the day Nathan would be a grown man and I could rest with pride. I was proud of Nathan, very proud. He went to university on a scholarship, graduated in engineering, got a job that paid more in a month than I earned in a year. I cried with joy at his graduation. I took photos of every moment. I kept the ceremony program in a box with photos from the day he was born and the notes he used to give me as a child. Those little folded paper notes where he drew hearts and wrote, "I love you, Mommy," in crooked letters. I was the happiest woman in the world that day. And then came Brittany. It's not that I disliked Brittany. I never said that to anyone, and even today I choose my words carefully. Brittany was smart, beautiful, articulate. She came from a family I never entered but imagined to have Persian rugs and floor-to-ceiling glass windows. Her mother, Margaret, was the kind of woman who arrives at an event and fills the space with a presence I simply didn't have. Well-dressed, well-spoken, perfumed in just the right way. And when Nathan brought Brittany home for the first time, I saw in his eyes an admiration that I had never managed to inspire in him, at least not in the way he could see in other people. They married in a ceremony that I helped pay for, even though no one knew that. Nathan had asked me for a loan 2 years before and never brought it up again. I didn't collect. I sat in the 3rd row of the ceremony, in my best dress, and smiled the whole time. When the cake was cut, the camera was pointed at Brittany's family. I appeared in 3 photos. In 2 of them, I was out of focus. I told myself it was normal, that children grow up and build their own lives, that I should be grateful he was happy, that a good mother erases herself when her son no longer needs her. But nobody told me that erasing myself completely would be the choice Nathan would learn to expect from me. When Liam was born, my grandson, I thought things would change. There is something about the birth of a child that seems to reset everything, that makes people remember what matters. I bought gifts, offered help, said I would watch him when Brittany needed to rest. I went to the hospital the day he was born with a blanket I had made myself by knitting for months, with his name embroidered in the corner. Brittany thanked me with the smile she reserved for obligatory situations. Nathan said, "How lovely, Mom," without taking his eyes off his phone. In the months that followed, I called every week. Sometimes Nathan answered. Sometimes it went straight to voicemail. Sometimes I received a text message hours later saying he was busy. I visited Liam 3 times in the first year. Brittany's mother, Margaret, would stay in their apartment for weeks at a time. I found out through Brittany's Instagram photos, where Margaret appeared holding Liam with the proud grandmother smile I so badly wanted on my own face. I stopped commenting on the photos after Brittany started taking days to respond. I stopped asking about Liam after Nathan told me in a short phone call that I was making a drama out of this. I learned to wait, not to ask, to be invisible and grateful for the visibility they granted me. Liam's second birthday arrived on a Friday in October. I had known the date for months because I kept every date related to him on the calendar, marked with a little star. I went to the store 3 times before deciding on the gift. I ordered the cake from a bakery, but then thought it would be more special if I made it myself, and I spent the previous afternoon baking a carrot cake with cream cheese frosting, which had been Nathan's favorite as a child, thinking that perhaps he would like to see that at his son's birthday. I wrote, "Happy birthday, Liam," with icing in a shade of blue I knew was the little one's favorite color. On Saturday morning, I took the bus to Nathan's house. I hadn't been invited, it's true. But no one had said I shouldn't come either. I thought grandmothers show up, that grandmothers are welcome, that sons, however much they have their own lives, understand that a mother arriving with a handmade cake on a Saturday morning is an act of love, not an intrusion. I climbed the porch steps and heard music inside, laughter, the voices of children. My heart raced with joy. I rang the doorbell. Nathan opened the door. He had a glass in his hand, a new shirt, a smile that disappeared when he saw me. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I came to Liam's birthday. I brought the cake. Look." He raised his hand. A small gesture, like someone stopping traffic. "Mom, you weren't invited. We only called people who matter." And he closed the door. I don't know how long I stood there. The cake was in my hands. I could hear the party from inside. I could hear a child laughing, could hear Margaret's voice saying something about the cake she had brought. I could hear Brittany laughing. I could hear my son's voice mixed with those voices, normal, carefree, as if what he had just done was an administrative detail resolved, a small thing. I walked down the porch steps, slowly. I sat on the bus bench at the corner. I placed the cake on my lap. And then something happened that I didn't expect. I didn't cry. I felt something much deeper than tears, a kind of cruel clarity, the type that comes when an illusion finally ends and you realize that part of you already knew this for a long time, you just chose not to see it. I didn't matter. It's not that I had done something wrong, it's that to Nathan I had never mattered enough. I was the mother who was always there, and precisely because I was always there, he had learned to never need to value me. The bus came. I got on. I went home. That night, I did the only thing I knew how to do when I needed to think clearly. I cleaned the house, washed the dishes, swept the floor, folded the clothes. Then I sat in the living room chair with a cup of tea and stared at the wall where I had hung photos of Nathan over the years. The baby in my arms, the 5-year-old boy with the missing tooth, the teenager at his high school graduation, with the cap and scroll, smiling for the camera with the smile I recognized as genuine because I knew every version of his smile. The man at his university graduation ceremony, the groom with Brittany by his side. I looked at each photo and asked myself when the last time was that my son had looked at me as someone who mattered. I couldn't remember. That frightened me more than anything else. I went to bed close to midnight. My phone stayed silent all night. The next day began like an ordinary Sunday. I woke at 6 a.m. out of decades of habit, made coffee, sat with the newspaper I still subscribed to in print because I liked the smell. And then my phone rang. It was Nathan. I let it ring. Once, twice. On the third ring, I answered. "Mom." His voice was different. It wasn't the voice of the self-assured son. It was a younger voice, one I recognized from a distance, the voice of the 12-year-old boy who had accidentally broken my favorite mug and didn't know how to say it. "Mom, can you come here?" "What happened, Nathan?" A long pause. I heard him take a deep breath. "Brittany left. She took Liam." I arrived at Nathan's house 40 minutes later. He was sitting in the kitchen looking like someone who hadn't slept, still wearing the previous day's clothes, with the expression of someone who had just realized that the ground beneath their feet wasn't as solid as it seemed. The kitchen was messy with the remnants of the previous day's party. There were deflated balloons on the floor. Margaret's cake, with that professional white frosting, was cut in half on the counter. He told me in pieces. Brittany and he had a serious fight the night before, after the guests had left. It wasn't the first big fight, but it was the first in which she said she was tired, that she felt she was living for appearances, that the marriage had become a performance for her family and friends, and that she couldn't take it anymore. She had packed her bags while he slept, left a note, took Liam to her mother's house. "Did you know?" he asked me. "Did you see something I didn't?" I could have said many things in that moment. I could have said yes, that I saw things he chose not to see. I could have said that I had tried to say some of those things on other occasions and he had interrupted me. I could have said that perhaps the problem wasn't just Brittany. But I looked at my son sitting there, broken, 40 years old with the eyes of a lost child, and understood that he wasn't asking me for analysis. He was asking me for presence, the only thing I had always known how to give. "I'll make coffee," I said, and I got up to make coffee. We spent hours in that kitchen. I cleaned while he talked. He told me about the last few months, about fights I didn't know about the distance that had grown between him and Brittany, about the feeling that their life had become a set of well-organized obligations with no real intimacy behind them. And while he talked, I heard something that caught my attention. At no point did he speak about missing me. At no point did he say that he had realized, the evening before, that he had been wrong. And there, drying a glass at the sink, I made a decision that took me a long time to find the right words to describe. I decided that I was going to stop disappearing. When he finished talking, I put the glass on the shelf, turned to him, and said calmly, without anger, without the tremor I feared would come, "Nathan, I need to tell you something. Yesterday you closed the door in my face in front of my grandson's home, with a cake I made in the middle of the night in my hands. You told me I wasn't someone who matters. I needed you to know that I heard that, and that it hurt me in a way I'm not going to pretend didn't happen." He looked at me for a long second. I saw the moment he was going to defend himself, explain, minimize, but something in him stopped. "I know," he said, and he lowered his head. What happened in the days that followed was a slow and non-linear process, the kind that doesn't fit into a tidy narrative arc. There was no moment of revelation where Nathan knelt down and begged forgiveness with tears in his eyes while an emotional piece of music played in the background. Real life doesn't work that way. What there was a series of small moments where truths emerged like water rising from the ground after rain, slowly, inevitably. One afternoon that week, Nathan went to pick up some of Liam's clothes from Brittany's apartment and came back later than expected. He sat down in my kitchen this time and was silent for a while before saying, "You were always there," and I acted as if that were nothing. It wasn't a formal apology. It was an observation he was making out loud for the first time. I let it hang in the air without answering it immediately, because some things need time to settle. 2 days later, he called me late at night. I was nearly asleep. "Mom, tell me something. When I was little and you were working 2 jobs, what did you do when you got home after I was asleep?" I wasn't expecting the question. I was quiet for a second. "I'd go into your room to watch you sleep," I said. "Sometimes I'd stay a few minutes just watching, then I'd go to sleep." Silence on the other end. "Why are you asking me that, Nathan?" "Because I did that with Liam today. I went to see him sleeping in Brittany's mother's bed, and I stood there, looking at him. And then I remembered to ask you if you used to do that with me." I said yes, that I did it every night when I could, that on the days I came home very late and he had grown enough for that to worry me, I would still open the door and stand there for a moment before going to sleep. "I didn't know," he said. "Children rarely know," I said. "That's how it works." In the weeks that followed, Nathan and Brittany began conversations about what they would do. They weren't easy. There was hurt on both sides, and I was wise enough to understand that it wasn't my place to enter those conversations unless asked. What I could do was be available, and that's what I did. Brittany called me 3 weeks after the party. I wasn't expecting that. She said she wanted to meet me for coffee, just the two of us. I accepted without hesitation. We sat in a cafe near her house. She arrived before me, already had her coffee in hand. She was tired around her eyes, but something in her seemed lighter than usual, like someone who had set down a weight they had been carrying for a long time. "Dorothy," she said, "I need to apologize to you." I said nothing. I let her continue. "I was never fair to you. I saw how Nathan treated you, and I let it happen because it was easier, because you were the person who wouldn't complain, because my mother was always available to me, and it was more comfortable to put her at the center of things than to recognize that you deserved to be there too." Those words reached a place in me that I didn't know was waiting for them. It wasn't about the party. It wasn't about the cake or the closed door or the Instagram photos where I was out of focus. It was about being seen by someone who wasn't obligated to see me, but chose to. "Thank you, Brittany," I said, and I meant it truly. "There is something I haven't told yet, and which is perhaps the most important part of all this." In the week after the party, while Nathan was beginning to understand the magnitude of what he had done, and Brittany was at her mother's house trying to organize her thoughts, I made a decision about myself. I had retired 2 years before. I had a small but sufficient savings to live modestly. For years I had talked about taking a trip to Costa Rica, the one that appeared on the wall calendar in the living room and that I had mentally marked as, "when there's time to spare." There never was. But now, sitting in that silent house with the leftover cake from the day before and the phone that wasn't ringing, I understood that time doesn't spare itself. Time passes, and I was waiting for someone's permission to live a life that only I could give to myself. I called a travel agency on Tuesday morning. I booked a 2-week trip to Costa Rica for the following month. I paid with my card without a second thought. After that, I went to the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror for a long moment, and said out loud, to no one but myself, "You matter." I had never said that before. I realized I had never believed it. Something unexpected happened during this period that I need to tell because it changed a perspective I had carried for years. Margaret, Brittany's mother, that impeccable woman whom I had always seen as everything I was not, sent me a message asking to have coffee. I thought it would be about Liam, about the grandchildren, about some practical matter. It wasn't. Margaret arrived with a smile I had never seen on her before. A tired, real smile, without the veneer of perfection I had associated with her face for years. She sat down and said, directly, without preamble, "Dorothy, I've always envied you." I laughed involuntarily. It was impossible not to laugh. I, who had spent years feeling inferior to this woman, hearing her say she envied me. "Brittany loves you," she said. "She never knew how to say it properly, never showed it the way she should have, but she loves you. She used to tell me that you were the only person who showed up without expecting anything in return. That when she got sick early in the marriage and Nathan was traveling, you took the bus all the way there with soup, that you never judged her. While I was giving advice about what she should do, you simply showed up." I didn't know what to say. I remembered the soup, a Tuesday in November years ago, Brittany with a bad case of the flu, Nathan in Chicago for a conference. I made chicken broth and went over there because it seemed like the right thing to do. I hadn't even thought that anyone had noticed. "The problem," Margaret continued, "is that when people know you'll show up regardless of how they treat you, they stop making an effort. And the fault isn't only theirs. We also have to teach people how to treat us." Those words stayed with me for weeks. Nathan and Brittany went to couples therapy. It wasn't easy, it wasn't quick, and I don't know if it will result in what both of them hope. But Nathan also started individual therapy. He told me one afternoon in passing, as if it were logistical information. But I knew what that meant. I knew my son. It was the admission that there was something inside him that needed attention, and that he was finally willing to look at it. 1 month after the party, he came to my house on a Saturday afternoon without warning. I was in the garden, planting tomatoes, with earth on my hands and a hat on my head. He stood at the edge of the garden looking at me for a second before coming in. I came to apologize, he said, without preamble. For what I said at the door, for the party, for years of things I should have done and didn't. I wiped my hands on my apron. I looked at him. He was 42 years old and seemed at the same time older and younger than I knew him. Older because suffering ages you. Younger because vulnerability, when it finally appears, has a quality of childhood that never completely disappears. I accept, I said, and I want you to know something. I am not going back to being invisible. Not for you, not for Brittany, not for anyone. I love you too much to let you mistreat what I still have to give. Do you understand what I'm saying? He said he understood. And this time, I believed he truly understood. I went to see Liam 2 weeks later. Nathan picked me up on a Saturday morning. Brittany was home, and there was a tension between the two of them that was real but manageable. The kind of tension of people who are still discovering what they are to each other after having said difficult truths out loud. Liam recognized me. He was 2 years and a few months old, that phase when children still live largely in the present but begin to build memories that will last. He looked at me, looked at Nathan, looked back at me, and said, "Grandma." One word, just one. But with it, he built a bridge that I was afraid would never exist. Brittany stood near the window watching. When I turned to her, her eyes were glistening. She smiled, that real smile I had rarely seen on her, and said, "He asks about you, you know." I held Liam in my arms and let the moment be what it was. I went to Costa Rica in a September of alternating sun and rain, as that country is. I stayed in a small hotel near the forest, woke every day to the sounds of birds I didn't know how to name, walked trails that left me breathless from the altitude and the beauty at the same time. I ate food I didn't know. I talked with people I'll never see again. I sat on the hotel porch at the end of one afternoon, watching the light change in the treetops, and felt for the first time in many years that I was completely in the right place, doing exactly what I needed to be doing. Nathan sent me a message on the third day. "How is it going?" I sent him a photo of the view from my window. He replied, "Wow, you deserved this a long time ago." I saved that message. On the last night, sitting in a square in a small town with an ice cream in my hand and the sound of local life all around, I thought about everything that had happened since that Saturday in October when a sun closed a door in my face. I could have stayed trapped in that corridor. I could have carried that pain as one more thing to be endured in silence. One more time I erased myself so as not to be a bother. But I didn't do that. Sometimes the worst moment of your life is the gateway to the best. I learned during this period some truths that no one taught me, but that I should have discovered much sooner. The first is that love is not the same as servitude. I loved Nathan deeply, and because of that I sacrificed, I yielded, I erased myself. But true love doesn't ask you to disappear. True love has limits, has a voice, has the right to say, "This hurt me," and expect to be heard. The second is that children learn to treat us the way we teach them they can treat us, not because they are bad, but because human beings are shaped by circumstances. If you always forgive without naming the hurt, if you always show up regardless of how you were treated, if you never establish that there is a limit beyond which you won't go, then you are, without meaning to, teaching that there is no limit. It's not the child's fault. It's a dynamic that was built over time and that can be changed, but it requires that you change first. The third is that you cannot wait for someone to give you permission to exist. That permission only comes from within, and when you finally find it, the things around you begin to rearrange themselves in a way you couldn't predict before. 1 year after Liam's birthday, we all sat together at a dinner table for the first time in a long while. Nathan and Brittany were still in therapy, but something between them had changed. A different quality of presence that you see when people stop performing for each other and actually begin to listen. Liam was bigger, speaking in complete sentences, had Nathan's hair and Brittany's eyes, and the way of twisting his mouth when he was thinking that reminded me of a photo I had of my own mother. Nathan had cooked dinner. That surprised me because he never cooked. He spent 2 hours in the kitchen before I arrived, and when I walked in, the apartment smelled of garlic and tomato and the spices he had bought without really knowing how to use, but which had turned out well all the same. "Why are you cooking?" I asked. "Because you always did this for me, and I want to know what it feels like." I sat at the table, in the chair they had placed for me near the window, with Liam by my side asking me to open his cup, and I thought, this, right here. A door closed in your face can be the most humiliating thing in the world, or it can be the moment when you stop and ask what it was you expected to find on the other side of it. In my case, I expected to be accepted, to be seen, to be included. And I wasn't, for years, and I kept showing up hoping that this time it would be different. The closed door was brutal, but it was honest in a way the half-open doors had never been. Because while the door was half open, I kept convincing myself that it was enough, that it was better than nothing, that one day I would have the right to the fully open door. When it closed for good, I could no longer deceive myself, and that's when, without meaning to, my son gave me the most difficult and most valuable gift of my life: clarity. Clarity that I deserved more, clarity that I was capable of more, clarity that my life was not an appendage of my son's life. It was mine. I know that many of you reading this recognize some part of this story. Perhaps it isn't a son. Perhaps it's a husband, a sister, a friend of decades, a boss, a colleague. Someone to whom you gave the best of yourself for years with consistency and silence and hope, and who at some point said, with words or with actions, that what you offer is not enough or is not needed or simply doesn't matter. And I want to tell you something that no one told me in time. You don't have to disappear to be loved. You don't have to be perfect to deserve presence. You don't have to wait for someone to recognize your worth to start acting as if you had it. Because the recognition of others is a wonderful thing when it comes, but it cannot be the condition for your existence. You matter. Now, before someone tells you that. Before your son calls asking for help. Before the trip and the garden and the Saturday afternoon with the cake in hand. You matter in this exact moment, just as you are, with all the things you are still discovering about yourself. On Liam's 3rd birthday, I was invited. Nathan called me in advance, asked if I could bring the carrot cake with cream cheese frosting. I said I could. I made the same cake as the other time, with the blue icing and the name written in the corner. When I arrived, the door was open. Nathan was on the threshold, without a glass in his hand this time, and when he saw me, he took the cake box and then hugged me. A real, lingering hug, the kind that says things that words can't quite say. "Did the cake turn out well this year?" he asked. "Same as always," I said. "It's the best I've ever eaten in my life," he said. And this time, I believed him. If this story touched some part of you, if you saw yourself in Dorothy, if you have ever been the person who showed up uninvited, the person who always gave and rarely received, the person who learned to make themselves small to fit into the life of someone they loved, I need you to do one thing right now. Leave a comment below telling me, have you been through something similar? Have you ever had to choose between being invisible and being honest? I want to know. And more than that, I want you to know that you are not alone in this. If this content reached you somehow, if someone shared it, if you found it by chance, if someone sent it thinking of you, then it fulfilled its purpose. Share it so that more people who need to hear this can hear it. Give it a like so that more people can find this story. And subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Because there are more stories of Dorothy to come, and they all have one thing in common. In the end, the woman who learned to say, "I matter," always finds her way back to herself. Until next time. Dorothy.